Okay. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Others may filter in as we continue on today, but good afternoon, good morning, depending on which time zone you are in. Really happy to be here today, and thank you for joining us for the Center on Parenting and Opioids webinar. We're really fortunate to have Dr. Kimberly Renk joining us today. And as you see on this first slide here, she is the professor of psychology at University of Central Florida. She also directs the Understanding Young Children and Families Clinic and Laboratory there. You might have seen from her bio, she's extremely well published in the area of working with interventions for underserved children and families, particularly those who may have experienced trauma, may have family histories of substance use, may be involved in child welfare. Received many awards and honors, including funding from organizations like 0 to 3 that are real powerhouses in this space. And she's also a licensed psychologist. So we're extremely fortunate to have you here, Dr. Renk, to join us as part of our webinar series for the Center on Parenting and Opioids at University of Oregon and Oregon Health and Science University. For folks who are, before I turn it over to you, just want to let folks know that we do like to keep these as kind of conversational as possible, which I know is not always easy in a webinar format, but we do have a Q&A and a chat button, which you should see there. Please feel free to chime in at any point throughout the webinar, and I will try to notice those and be able to be a little bit interactive as we go along here. If you have questions that come up around particular slides or remarks that Dr. Renk is making, and we'll try to address those interactively, as well as have some time at the end. And another thing, just to remind folks, we do offer continuing education units for these webinars. So if what you'll see towards the end is a message pop up on your screen with a poll asking if you would like CEUs. And if you are one of those people who does want CEUs, just click yes on that, and that should initiate the process for getting the CEU credits. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over again to you, Dr. Renk. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you all. It looks like I know some of the people who are participating today, which is super fun, one of whom is one of my former doctoral students. So that is also nice for me to see. But I am excited to talk to everyone today about working with families who have been substance involved. I've done a lot of work in residential treatment programs for moms in particular through my work with child welfare. And so they are one of my favorite populations with whom to work, just because I always find them so fascinating. So we have a number of questions that I want to try and tackle today. I want to really take a look at that parent-child relationship and see what happens there when you have parents who are involved with substances, and start thinking about the best ways to intervene. I'm going to highlight one of the parenting programs that I enjoy the most, which is Circle of Security Parenting. But I'm also, if we have time, going to talk a little bit about some of my work with Early Childhood Court. Early Childhood Court is a specialty program, a specialty problem-solving court here in Florida. It is based on the Safe Babies Court Team model that's put out by 0 to 3. But in Florida, we've adopted it for our own, and now have over 30 circuits who are using the Early Childhood Court model. And we see a lot of our child welfare families come through there if they have littles who are in the 0 to 3 or 0 to 5 range. And many of those parents are substance involved, unfortunately, but it is an excellent program to tackle some of that. And so I'd like to highlight that as well as we kind of go through, but I want to start from the beginning. Whenever I think about this particular population, I always turn to the ACEs study. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, I would just look it up, just put in ACEs study and it'll take you there. But this work is based on the thinking of Vincent Felitti, who was seeing a lot of women in his eating and obesity clinics in Southern California. And he was realizing that he was noticing a connection between eating disorders or eating issues and childhood sexual abuse. And so he started to present this work to his colleagues, and someone from the CDC saw him speak and said, you know, I think this is a thing that we should investigate. And so what Vince Felitti and colleagues did was identified 10 adverse childhood experiences, one of which is substance use by a parent, and looked at the outcomes that individuals who were then grown-ups were experiencing based on these childhood experiences that they had. And certainly they found some things that are really interesting. One of the things that is most interesting is that certainly 2/3 of the population has had at least one adverse childhood experience. And they noticed that there was a dose response curve, that the more difficulties you had in childhood, the more likely it was that you were to have just about every negative outcome, or at least the risk for just about every negative outcome that has been studied, whether it's a physical health issue, a psychological health issue, issues in parenting, criminality, all kinds of things of that nature. But in my research laboratory at the University of Central Florida, we've spent a lot of time looking at parents who have been substance involved in one way or another. And again, in the child welfare system, it's pretty typical to see parents who um, have had substance involvement. And we know that when there are substances involved in families, it is much more difficult for reunification to occur in child welfare families. Um, and and so looking at substance use in families is actually quite important to solidifying reunification and making sure that those issues are addressed before kids go back home. One of the things that is so concerning to me in my area um, is that when you look at the numbers of families who have substances involved in their child welfare case, one of the things that we notice is that the youngest of our children tend to be the ones who are overrepresented. And so, you know, that's where my love of infant mental health really comes in and is super helpful, because we know that infants are incredibly perceptive to what's going on with their parents. And so even the youngest of children is going to be impacted by parent substance use. I mean, some parents will say things like, oh, they're not going to notice, or they're not going to understand what's going on, or things of that nature. But we know that even babies can be fully impacted by their parents' substance use. Sorry, guys, I'm going to take a side step here. I'm noticing some things going on in the chat. Somebody's asking about my education, and I can elaborate just a little bit before we go on a little bit further. My PhD is actually in clinical psychology from the University of South Florida. I also have specialty training through an infant mental health fellowship that I happened to complete on my predoctoral internship while I was at Louisiana State University Health Sciences Center. I've been working in the child welfare system since the mid 90s, which kind of dates me at this point, which isn't very cool for me to say out loud, but that's just kind of how things roll, I suppose. But I've been working with families who've been child welfare involved for quite some time now. My love of very young children and that work, kind of addressing trauma in infants and young children, came from that work at LSU. And once I hit LSU and had exposure to doing that type of work in the child welfare system, I have not looked back since. All of my work at the University of Central Florida, for the most part, has been focused on trauma in families who have very young children. And so with that work, I've been able to interface with a number of community agencies and such, including our child welfare system and our early childhood court system here in Central Florida and throughout the state of Florida. But I also do work as well in some of our high-risk preschools, where I've used actually Circle of Security that we're going to talk about to train preschool teachers and childcare providers to know something more about attachment and to understand how to have that roll out in their classrooms so that children can be better adjusted overall. As I mentioned, I've been in some of our residential treatment programs here for moms in Central Florida, providing circle of security parenting and other consultation as well. If you have other specific questions about any of that, we certainly can tackle those at the very end of our time together today. Since we only have an hour, I do want to get moving with some of our content so we can get to everything, but please feel free to put some more of that in the chat if you have other questions. Okay, well, with that sidestep, let's go back to talking about littles and their families and the care that they receive from their parents. One of the things that I think is understated often in psychology, which I always hate, psychologists tend to look within individuals to try and understand what their psychological symptoms look like. But in fact, when we're talking about children and parenting, the context of the relationship is undeniable. And we know that babies in particular, but also children of all ages, benefit from relationships with their primary caregivers being strong and secure. And so, when I go about doing my work, whether it's in the preschools or in the court system or interfacing with child welfare or with those residential treatment programs, one of the things that I always notice is how those relationships are going. And I think when you start talking about parents who are substance involved, one of the things that's so noteworthy is the fact that they had issues growing up with their own parents. And so we start to see this intergenerational pattern of substance misuse, where oftentimes my mommies will say to me, my mom used or my dad used, and this is how it's impacted me. And them gaining that insight into how those relationships are coming around full circle as they're looking at how they're trying to parent in a state of recovery from their substance of choice is always really interesting to tackle. But I want to give a little context to this for those who may be less aware of infant development. I mean, infants come to the world pre-wired to be able to interface in that primary care relationship with mom, dad, or whoever is going to be their primary caregiver. This is a graphic that I borrowed from a colleague that shows 6-weekers responding to the face of their primary caregiver. And you can see how the baby at such a very early age knows to mimic the facial expressions of their primary caregiver. I also want to give a video demonstration too to get us thinking about this. So let me play this for you and then we can kind of discuss further.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. And the still face experiment what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions. They turn away. They feel the stress of it. they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Yeah. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
All right, hopefully that gave everybody something to think about. I mean, that baby is so incredibly resourceful at all of about probably 6 months of age. But the still face is a brilliant tool that was designed by Edtronic that you saw talking there. He is incredibly insightful as he's looking at how babies and their caregivers interact with each other. I happened to run into Edtronic. He was staying in the same hotel as I was when we were at the World Association of Infant Mental Health Conference a few times ago. And so that was a thrill for me, because just looking at how elegant the design of that little paradigm is, where you take a sample of how infants and their caregivers interact with each other. And clearly from looking at that baby, you can see that there's a secure attachment there, that baby is very engaged with mommy. Mommy is very responsive to baby, and they have a lovely little dance going on there. And then what the paradigm calls for is that you have the parent do a still face. That's why it's called that. And the parent stops responding, so you can see the baby's reaction to what that means for them. And I know, talking with my moms who are substance involved, there's a little snippet of something like this in the Circle of Security video footage that is shared with the parents as they go through the program. And, often the moms and dads that I've worked with have commented on that, they say when they've been high or when they've been using, they're always the still face, and they wonder about what that means for the baby. And so we have a good discussion about that. Certainly, when you look at that baby in that video, as Philip Hart says in the chat, it's amazing. Like, it really is amazing. That's a hugely resourceful baby who tries everything to get mom's focus back on her when mom has a still face. And so you can see how important it is for that engagement, for that little dance that they do, to be in full swing when that baby is trying to interact with their mom. And so when you look at parents who are substance involved, we know that it doesn't look exactly like that. And children are going to end up showing a higher rate of disorganized attachment as a result of their interactions with parents who are substance involved. And so, it's kind of interesting to think about. Leslie is making some comments in the chat about cell phones and social media and parents being distracted. And certainly, parents' involvement with babies looks a little different with our access to technology these days. And even I've seen plenty of parents hand over the cell phone to littles, like very young children, and they know how to use the device with ease, which is really interesting. But, hopefully there's good enough parenting going on around cell phone use or social media use that it's not as impactful as when parents are using substances, obviously. But, thinking about that, there has to be that dance that goes on. And for those of us that work with parents and babies, I mean, in the Circle of Security terminology, we would refer to those parents as being gone. Like, they may be physically present, but certainly emotionally, they are not present with their babies. And so that is going to have some implications for what those babies take away from those interactions. And certainly when you go to remediate that, that has to be a prime target of discussion. And so then you start having to look through your attachment and trauma lenses to really identify what needs most remediation and to get that caregiver child dyad back on track. But, thinking about attachment in particular, hopefully you all have a healthy background in attachment, but we know based on John Bowlby's theorizing, he's one of our seminal theorists in this area, that how we are treated in infancy gives us a sense of how the rest of the world is going to treat us as we go throughout our life. And certainly if you have parents who have misused substances, you are going to be primed to expect some unpredictability and emotional unavailability from your caregivers. And that's going to create some interesting dynamics as you go through your development, if that's your expectation of the world and of the care that you are to receive from people who love you. And so that creates some interesting dynamics there. But thinking about this further, again, we have to consider the importance of the relationship for a baby in the context of their caregiver who may be involved with substances. And that certainly is going to change the expectations of how things are going to go. And, interestingly, thinking about this from the parent's perspective, I put some quotes on this slide that were shared with me by some different parents. And, I think they are grappling with a world that is also unpredictable to them based on their own upbringing and their experience of substance use itself. And so thinking about their experiences and giving them insight into how that's impacting their interactions with others, let alone with their children, is actually quite important to do. And so, thinking about this, I always love this graphic because when I roll into early childhood court and we have families who are substance involved, oftentimes they come off really rough around the edges in the very beginning as they're facing the ramifications of having had their children taken into the child welfare system. And they come in with a lot of bravado and a lot of gruffness. And they try to kind of put up this image of being this tough person who's going to take this in stride. But really, once you get under the surface of that, you can see the brokenness that they've experienced based on their own upbringing and their involvement in substances, which usually is related to some sort of trauma that they have had in their childhood or in their early life as well. And so it kind of changes your frame of reference. I mean, right now I have a mommy who insists on cussing me out every time she comes to my office, which I'm not so appreciative of. But that's her way of trying to protect herself from somebody intruding into her life and getting too close and her feeling vulnerable as a result. And so you can kind of see, if you don't have the right lens through which you're looking and you put your trauma lenses down and become less trauma sensitive, you may want to respond to that parent in a certain type of way that's not going to be helpful for the parent or for you as the person trying to intervene or for the intervention that you're trying to deliver. So definitely something to think about. And, remembering that parent-child attachment really is about teaching that child how to regulate their own emotional experience of the world. That's something that often gets forgotten. And especially when you have parents who are substance involved, oftentimes their children are parentified in a way where the children start taking care of the parents at a very young age, or start taking care of the other children who may be in the family as well. But we have to remember, in infancy, infants don't come to the world ready to handle their own emotions. They need that co-regulation experience with a caregiver who is predictable, so they learn how to manage themselves. And if that is missing, there's going to be some inherent dysregulation that they experience in both their emotions and their behaviors. And so that has to be targeted as well by any interventions that you're going to use as you move forward with that parent-child dyad as well. But, we already mentioned the disorganized attachment and how confusing that is, but also thinking about, like, how do we intervene? Where do we start? And certainly the place that most people start is with the parent's substance misuse, first and foremost. And oftentimes our treatment programs are focused on detoxifying or getting the parent to stop using. But oftentimes, once they start to discard their substance use and try to find other coping strategies, that they can use as they try to tackle the world. The thing that becomes so obvious is oftentimes substances were on board in the first place because of traumas that they have experienced. And so our best substance treatment programs not only are going to take care of the substance misuse, but also are going to provide some strong therapeutic interventions that are evidence-based that can start to address the parents' own trauma, which has spilled over probably into their relationship with their children as well. And so, you know, thinking about this, it's kind of like a multi-tiered system that we need for our interventions, where you're addressing the substances, you're addressing the parents' individual trauma, and then you're also trying to tackle the parenting and repair whatever has happened in their family with their children with regard to their parenting. And so we have a full plate of things that needs to be addressed for these parents to continue to do well. And, you know, looking at these families, not only is there usually substance misuse, but oftentimes there are psychological symptoms that are resulting from trauma or other things. And certainly domestic violence or family violence of one kind or another is not atypical either. And so we start looking at these intergenerational cycles, and we have quite a lot to do pretty quickly as we're looking at what's in the mix. I love this graphic. I happened to find it online, but it really speaks to these intergenerational cycles that we see with regard to child maltreatment and trauma, but also to substance misuse. And so, you know, parents carry quite a lot of guilt for whatever it is that they have carried forward from their family of origin to their own children. And that's going to cross all those realms that we just mentioned for sure. But, you know, part of what we want to give these parents is improvements in their own reflective functioning. And sometimes this is hard to do. You know, reflective functioning requires a person to put themselves in somebody else's shoes. And I think when parents are first starting their substance treatment programs, they're not quite ready yet to put themselves in the shoes of their children. And it's only after they've had some time to really delve into some insight-oriented therapeutic interventions or to some really good parenting where they can start to understand the impact that they've had on their own children. But we know that if we can improve reflective functioning in parents, that actually is going to be a buffer and is going to help them increase security for their young children over time, no matter what intervention is delivered. So this is a pretty important piece of things for them to be able to put themselves in their children's shoes and to organize some of their thinking around what has happened in their families. But thinking about this, you know, where does the parenting go? And I have seen all different kinds of arrangements as I've gone from community agency to community agency and looked at what our child welfare system, at least here in my state, does. And really, if you can just get it to mix and match, however that's going to work, and you have a really good, strong evidence-based program that you're going to use, I think you're going to be in pretty good shape. You know, I used to be a big fan of the cognitive behavioral skills-based programs, but once I saw a Circle of Security and I saw how it taught parents about attachment in a different kind of way, I have not been able to look at anything else, just because I think that attachment piece is so critical, especially for parents who are substance involved. So I want to give you a sense of what goes on with Circle of Security. It's a little bit different than other parenting programs, but it really gives parents some pieces of things that they really need. And part of what we see with Circle of Security parenting is it gives parents this lovely map of attachment to look at that I'm going to show you in just a minute. And then it also provides them with some video footage. So essentially in the parenting program itself, as you go group to group, there are different topics that are covered that I'll highlight for you in just a second. But the group itself is parents coming together, watching some video footage, having a pause to really think about what they saw and to tie that video footage to the concepts that they need in order to think about how they might want to change their parenting. And really, it's it's a lovely program because it gives them a chance to think about what they're doing with their own children, but also to think about what they got from their parents themselves. Here's that circle of security map that I mentioned to you. It is just so elegantly simple. Once I saw this map, I said, of course, this is what attachment looks like. Where you have the child going out to explore the world, as we know all children do, but then it provides in some boxes what the caregiver, the parent's job is as they go out to explore their world. So parents are to watch over them, help them, enjoy with them, delight in them. And then when kids get tired of exploring, they're going to come back into their parent or their caregiver for some reassurance. And then during that time, the parent or caregiver is going to be protecting the child, comforting the child, delighting in them, and helping them to organize their feelings. And certainly when I show this to parents who are substance involved, one of the main things that they want to talk about is that organization of feelings that's highlighted in that lower box on the safe haven side. Because they often say, you know, I think that I was using my substances or substance of choice to try to organize my own feelings. And really what ended up happening is I became numb and now I don't know what to do. And so we have the discussion of how they really never learned how to organize their own feelings well based on the parenting that they received. And now it's a struggle for them to organize themselves, let alone organize their littles. And so that is a prime target of discussion as we go through things for sure. But I want to give you a little snippet of the Circle of Security program. So I want to play a little video for you. There are many other videos available. Just as an aside, you can go to YouTube and put in Circle of Security Parenting and a number of them will come up. You can also go to the Circle of Security International website and they have a number of things that they have posted there as well if you want to investigate further. But let me show this to you so you get a little flavor of what this is about.
As parents, we've all asked these kinds of questions. How can I stop my child behaving like this? What do I do to manage her behavior? Is there something wrong with him? Why would she behave like this just to get attention? But what if the problem lies in the question? If instead we ask, how can I improve my relationship with my child? And what is her behavior telling me? We start to see that the need for attention is actually a need for connection. A child's behavior is in fact a form of communication, and it is driven by this need for an emotional connection. Children need emotional connection with their parent as a secure base to go and explore the world, and they need it to be a safe haven to come back to when things get too difficult. It's possible to control your child's behavior by threats, rules, and rewards, but stickers, treats, and time out lose their effectiveness eventually. The thing that really changes them is your presence and unconditional love. The bottom line is, they are more likely to behave well when they're feeling secure in their emotional connectedness and safe in our love. Love isn't just a warm, fluffy feeling, and it certainly doesn't mean giving in to them. Far from it. Your children need you to be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, so you can both set limits and take the time to understand your child's emotional world and respond to it, helping them make sense of their mess and confusion. We know this isn't straightforward. That's why with Circle of Security Parenting, we try to support parents in this way of relating to their children, from newborns to teenagers and beyond. In fact, we're seeing remarkable effects when this way of thinking is applied to other important relationships as well. Whatever the question, learning to be connected is a big part of the answer.
Okay, y'all, so that is one of my favorite video snippets about Circle of Security, but as I said, there are many others, so please do check it out. So you can get a sense of what's included in this parenting program. The first couple of sessions really teaches parents about attachment and what it's supposed to look like. And then it talks about being with, or like how do you impart that sense of connection between a parent and a child. And then towards the end, the second half of the program, it really gets parents in touch with their own triggers, or what the program calls shark music, so that they have a sense of where they're going to be triggered in one way or another by their child's behavior, whether it's they don't like their child going out too far, they get overwhelmed when their child comes in and needs reassurance, if there are issues with being gone, which always come up with parents who are substance involved. And then at the very end, it starts to give them a primer on how to deal with ruptures and how to repair. And so really this 8-week DVD-based program, which is the one that we've been using in Florida most often, this version of Circle of Security, it really is meant to be a primer for other interventions that can come later. But in early childhood court, for example, we link Circle of Security and child parent psychotherapy, an evidence-based intervention program for dyads that involve a caregiver and a young child, that's based on the work of Alicia Lieberman. We link those together and they are a lovely match for each other. Somebody's asking in the chat about what you need to deliver a Circle of Security program. It's not enough to just go and buy the book. There are some lovely books on Circle of Security, but to provide the program, you actually have to go through one of the Circle of Security trainings that are listed. If you go to the Circle of Security International website, there will be a list of trainings of a variety of different kinds that you can participate in, but you need to actually participate in the training and get the actual manual and access to the video footage that goes along with the program in order to provide it. So if you're interested in that, check out Circle of Security International. One of the main messages that I really love that goes along with the Circle of Security program that parents who are substance involved always respond to is this idea of parents needing to be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind all at the same time. And we talk about the need for there to be a balance amongst all of those things. And so for parents to really think about that and to understand where they're struggling. And oftentimes parents who are substance involved, especially those who've been in residential treatment programs, when they've done this program with me, they often talk about this idea that it's hard for them to be bigger and stronger and set limits because they experience so much guilt over what has happened in their family as a result of their substance misuse. And so we talk a lot about achieving a good balance, because if you're just bigger and stronger and only setting limits, you can easily spill over into mean. If you're just wiser and kind and not setting any limits, then you can easily spill over into weak, which is often where parents identify themselves when they're trying to repair with their child. But really, for children to get the optimal predictability out of their relationship with their caregiver, they need bigger and stronger to be balanced with wiser and kind. And so that's always a lovely discussion. But as I mentioned, there's lots of interesting language that goes along with the Circle of Security program. And you can always tell when parents have taken to it because they start to use the language that we talk about, like being with. You know, how is it that you can let a child know that you're really paying attention, that you're really there for them? So we talk about this idea of being with. Those triggers, you know, I've seen moms who have been substance involved talk about shark music with regard to parenting, but also their own shark music. What are their triggers that they're worried about encountering that may prompt them to relapse in the future? So they really take to the language in this particular program because it is really descriptive, and it comes along with lots of visuals that come with the video footage when the program is delivered. So it's really lovely to see. But also thinking about where the parents are going to struggle with their children. Like if the kids are going out and that makes them uncomfortable, what are they going to do? If the kids are having trouble coming in and that's making the parents uncomfortable, what is that going to do? So we spend a lot of time thinking about how that's supposed to look for them. Let me give you a video example here of what a parent looked like. This comes as part of the footage and parents. But check this video out and see what you think. Oops.
Okay, I'm all in. What do you want to do at Jesse's? Hey. Hey. Why are you so mad? No, you don't need to write. I just had to fill out paperwork. That's it. This is a cool thing, huh? Fill it. Paper. They're my papers, and I already filled them out. They're somewhere. Hey. Hey, that's the guys. Mad if you kick that. Come sit down here. We're almost done. You're mad though? Doesn't come back in a little bit. Listen. The papers are mine. Hey, what's the matter? You're not writing on them anyway, so you're not writing on them, so it doesn't matter. You don't need to look at it. You don't need to look at them. You can look at them, but you're not using the pen.
Pause it.
Now, as you can imagine, seeing that video gets parents talking, and I hear all kinds of things about what kind of discipline that child needs and this, that, and the other. But really, it's kind of a good place for us to talk about where parents may start, and to see that mom be particularly weak with her son really gets my moms, especially who are substance involved, talking about what it is that they need to do differently as they use the circle concepts in their own parenting. We've had a couple research protocols embedded in our work with our substance involved moms. This information that's on the slide right now is from an early study that I did looking at changes over time, pre and post, as moms who are substance involved participated in circle and what they took away. And certainly the one thing we couldn't control for is where they were in their substance treatment. And in our neck of the woods here in Florida, oftentimes we lose about half of our moms, not because they don't like the program, but because they exit the residential treatment program after about a month. So they come in, they try to get clean and sober. And for those who can't sustain it, they're out of there within about a month's time. And since we have 8 weeks of a program that's being delivered, we lose about half of our moms. But those who stay and participate both in their residential treatment program and who get circle exhibit some interesting changes, including decreases in neuroticism, increases in conscientiousness. They start to rethink how they were parented themselves and have different things to say about their experiences in childhood, but they also feel more in charge of their parenting after the fact, which I find completely interesting. We've also done some working model interviews with them. For those of you who aren't familiar with that particular interview, it really looks at attachment and parents working models for approaching their parenting. And you can see the pre-working models have some really interesting things to say, where parents are really starting to get in touch with the bad things that have happened in their parenting. But if you look at what happens to their working models after the fact, after participating in circle, you can see some much more positive messages and their attempts to try and take charge of their parenting so that they can do a better job for their own children and really correct some of the things that have happened for them. So Circle of security, I think, is a lovely approach to dealing with parents who are substance involved. But really, if we're going to get the best outcome possible, we need integration amongst a variety of different systems. And, oftentimes these parents, not only are they child welfare involved, but they have other involvement with judicial systems or the court system for one reason or another. They are obviously getting substance treatment, because that's how I was able to get in touch with them and have them participate in the first place. But they also need some individual work, whether that's provided as part of their substance treatment or not. Some have to get that on an outpatient basis somewhere else once they're done with their substance treatment program. But they also need to have some intervention for their children as well, because we know if they've been involved with substances, especially during pregnancy, there are impacts neurologically, biologically, and otherwise for their kids. But also if their parenting has been dysregulated because of their substance treatment, those children are going to need interventions as well, whether it be in school or some kind of therapeutic intervention itself. And really, when these kinds of interventions or these kinds of systems are integrated with each other, we can do a better job of remediating that family and making sure that everybody gets to a place that is predictable and safe. And that's where our problem-solving courts come in Florida. Early childhood court is just one example. We also have dependency drug courts in Florida now that are developing as a system. And those are child welfare involved families where substance is the main reason that children have come into the child welfare system. I've done most work with early childhood court. I've been working with the early childhood court in my circuit, gosh, for 7 years now, but I also consult with all the early childhood courts around the state, providing reflective supervision and consultation to the teams that are involved. And the thing that's so unique about early childhood court is all of those systems that we just had on the previous slide are working together. So this is a problem-solving court that has a multidisciplinary team that works with identified families. So for early childhood court, the families have to have either 0 to 3s or 0 to 5s, depends on the circuit as to who they will take. But parents are often involved in substance treatment. Parents are getting those evidence-based individual treatments as well, but they're also participating in child-parent psychotherapy and circle of security parenting to try and repair the traumas that the young children have experienced, even just from the removal from their family. And the thing that's different about early childhood court, as far as child welfare goes, is that every family meets with the team at least once a month. Every family is in front of the judge at least once a month. So all the providers and the families are accountable to the judge, because if you show up to court and you haven't done what you needed to do, you're going to hear about it from the judge. So there's more oversight, there's more visitation for parents, but there is much more intensive treatment, which is meant to repair the family as a whole. And if you look at some of the research that's out there on early childhood courts, what you will see is that families who participate in early childhood court have a shorter time to reunification. Once they are reunified, they're much less likely to have the kids come back into the system. So the recidivism rate is much improved with regard to early childhood court when you compare it to traditional dependency. And so it's a really lovely program. Like, it's intense and it's hard work, but when you have a great team, you're able to get a lot accomplished for these families, and we're able to address parents' substance involvement and whatever other traumas have happened in the families, and get kids to a permanent situation much more quickly as a result. So I want to leave just a few minutes at the end here for questions. So if anybody has questions about anything that I talked about, if you want to get them into the chat or the Q&A, I'm happy to entertain those here. I can go back and talk about any of the pieces that people would like more clarification on or more information about. You guys just let me know what it is that you need. so that I can go to where you want to go. We can backtrack through the slides if needed, because I zipped through that real quick to make sure we had enough time in our hour together to kind of cover everything. Questions for anybody or comments?
So it looks like we have a question from Shannon Peak. I can go ahead and enable talking.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Ashley. Can you hear me okay?
Yep,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much for the talk. Very interesting. I see you have a ton of experience in that, and that's really helpful. We're doing some programs where we're trying to support families with caregivers who are in recovery. And one of the things I think that we're most focused on right now is engagement for those families. And I wonder if you could speak from your experience to what you've found with engagement in either Circle of Security or other programs. Like, out of the parents who are offered participation, what do you find are common rates of people who agree to participate? And then following that, what tends to happen as far as completion?
Yeah, you know, that is a really interesting thing to think about, Shannon. I'm glad that you brought that up. Just because parents who are in this situation are really hard to reach. And so one of the things that has been so helpful when I was doing the residential work, where we were doing pre-post testing with Circle in residential programming, is it kind of became helpful for me to be a known entity at the treatment program. And so like the parents kind of spread the word. The same thing happened when I was doing Circle and child welfare. Like, once they hear about what you're going to do and they're not so suspicious, they're more likely to tag into you. But I also spent quite a lot of time like showing up at the residential treatment program, bringing donuts, chatting it up with the parents to try and let them see that I was a safe person. Like, just those little steps, because they come into whatever intervention you're going to provide with so much suspicion, because they've been so broken by their other relationships, that just building trust with them is really hard to do. And so in the residential treatment program, I had the benefit of, if they were assigned to my group and they were still in the treatment program, they had to attend. So that kind of was helpful. It's not that I never had anybody who's disgruntled to be there, but kind of working on your relationship with them to get them engaged with you, like that is a super helpful intervention to try and get them to stick with regard to whatever else you want to provide to them. And so, you know, I would encourage you to think about, how are you building rapport? How are you making it safe for them? And certainly when things are court ordered and, you know, they're very interested in who's going to know what and what are you going to say about them, you know, having transparency on board and you being very upfront about, this is what's shared, this is who knows, this is what I'm going to say, like all of those things help to make that relationship much more predictable for them. Other things for anybody?
Thanks, Dr. Renk. That was a wonderful presentation. And I guess you might have touched on this, but I'll just throw this in. And I'm wondering, Camille, this might be a question you were going to ask as well, but just thoughts around most of the examples you talked about, our videos were with mothers, and just thinking about fathers or other caregivers, people who aren't moms. Just any suggestions or advice, or how established the program is for folks, for other caregivers in a child's life?
Yeah, no, Circle of Security is good for everybody. You know, I happen to talk more about moms because I frequent the residential treatment programs for moms, but I do see dads as part of our child welfare system and our court system as well. And Circle just went through an update actually with the video footage. And with the new video version, there are many more visuals of dads, which I appreciated, because dads sometimes feel kind of funny rolling into a parenting program, especially if it's a co-parent kind of situation where there are moms and dads together. And so making parenting a thing for dads where they feel included. And, you know, it's always interesting to me I always feel bad for dads, because with dads, when they roll into court, they often have to prove their paternity. Whereas for moms, we kind of take for granted that if moms have the kids in tow, that that's their biological child. And so dads have these extra hoops that I think we have to appreciate, that it's not easy to be a dad, especially when you're in some of these systems. And so making it as welcome of an environment as possible for them to participate and really share their thoughts about where they fit in the family system is really important. I do a lot of work with foster parents and caregivers as well. And oftentimes, they benefit from understanding how substances look in parents and how that may have impacted the children and what kind of traumas kind of co-occur, because they're kind of keeping these children in the meantime while parents are working through their case plans. And some of these kiddos are challenging when things have been unpredictable, when they've been substance exposed and all of these other things. So having a safe spot for those caregivers and foster parents as well is a pretty important piece of child welfare work, for sure.
Great. Well, thank you.
Yes,
might
of
have-
course.
Yeah. Any last question from any participants? And if not, I want to just give a huge thank you to Dr. Renk, and also her email is on the slide that you all see. So if you have follow-up questions or positive feedback, I'm sure Dr. Renk would be welcome to receive that at the email. And I just want to thank you all for attending. Thank you, Dr. Renk, for your time and just very thought-provoking and encouraging, hopeful, I think, presentation to our group today.
Yeah, no, this is hard work, but it is well worth it when you can repair a family, especially when substances have been involved. So if you do have questions, please do feel free to email me. I'm happy to entertain those over email after our time together today. But thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And hopefully everyone saw the continuing education pop up if you needed to. I think participants are stepping out of the room. Ashley, I don't know if there's something camera I need to do at this point.